Merry Christmas and welcome to this very special edition of my Making a Mess series. In this episode, I'll be making a Christmas dinner using my mess kit and the 2-burner Coleman stove. The meal will feature the special edition Figgy pudding spam and mashed sweet potato. I'll also make a traditional New England holiday libation. Plus, I'll tell you about some of the New England Christmas traditions and wooden nutmegs. So please stick around to celebrate Christmas with me, the Yankee camper.
This is the Mise Plus. For our holiday special, we're going to be using a limited edition can of Figgy pudding spam to make our Christmas dinner. So, we'll start with the Figgy pudding spam, and we're going to need 5 figs, dried figs, to add to the recipe. I'm going to open these up and I'll be right back. So I've opened the figs and I'm going to remove 5 of these dried figs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll place these over here on the side. As you can see, they're just very simple little dried figs. And I'm going to place these into a small plastic bag marked figs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And seal those up. Place those aside for right now. We'll also need 1 small shallot, 4 ounces of mandarin oranges. This is the snack size. They come in a pack like this. A small 1-ounce box of dried raisins. And a 1/2 teaspoon of vegetable shortening. To recognize the season, I've selected a colorful Christmas bag. Open this up, and we'll place these ingredients right inside. But we also want to have a side dish with this Christmas dinner. For a side dish, I determined to have mashed sweet potato. So I will need 1 sweet potato, 1 tablespoon of dried milk, 1 tablespoon of butter flakes, a dash of nutmeg, a dash of coarse salt, and 2 pinches of black pepper. Put all of these into a small Loctite plastic bag and mark it sweet potato. Using the same holiday bag, we're going to add the sweet potato and the sweet potato dry ingredients. And it wouldn't be Christmas if we didn't have traditional eggnog with New England style rum. So we'll start our ingredients for our eggnog with 1 can of condensed milk. Now, condensed milk is unlike evaporated milk, and that this has sugar added. So you don't need to add any sugar. The sugar is already in there. We're also going to need 3 tablespoons of egg crystals, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla. This is vanilla powder. A dash of salt. And for spice, you can add whatever spice works for you. I have ground nutmeg, and so I'm going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And just a dash of ground cinnamon. I'm not a big fan of cinnamon, but it helps make it taste more holiday. Put these over here. Now, lastly, you're going to want 1 shot of New England style rum. And as you can see, we have just a little bit left. A shot is about 1.5 ounces. I'm going to measure that and get that set for going into our bag as well. So we've measured out 1.5 ounces or 45 milliliters. Put a cover on that so that it doesn't leak. One thing I like about these small containers is they seal really tight. I'll put that aside. Move the rum out of the way. And we'll add these ingredients to our Christmas dinner bag. So we need the condensed milk and the eggnog mixture. But what would Christmas be without some kind of a special dessert? And so for that, I've picked up fruitcake slices. I'm going to open these up. As you can see, these are small, individually wrapped slices of fruitcake. And I am just going to select 3 of those and add those right into my Christmas dinner bag. I don't want to forget the adult beverage. Just put that right in there. So opening that will be just like Christmas morning.
Traditions. New England has lots of traditions, and Christmas was recognized by the earliest Yankee settlers for all of its celebratory opulence, and banned it. That's right, Christmas was against the law. As early as the second winter of the Pilgrims in 1621, the first one they were too busy trying to not die, Governor Bradford complained about the non-separatists wanting the day off, and even took the toys from the children. From 1659 to 81, it was even officially outlawed and referred to as Fool's Tide because of the raucous, unchristian-like way it was celebrated. It wasn't until the mid-1700s that the New England colonies had started to relent. By 1870, when President Grant declared Christmas a federal holiday, most of the New England states had already recognized that December 25th was a day of celebration. Many homes even had trees decorated with popcorn and cranberries, a tradition that had actually started in Germany, then became popular with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Of course, the puritanical belief system has some genuine reasoning for disapproval. In Old England, Christmas was celebrated by those lower on the social scale by going out wassailing. This was the act of dressing up in costumes and masks and wandering about to those more fortunate, then caroling and asking for a handout, usually involving liquor or a sweet treat such as figgy pudding. The group could get belligerent if ignored, and when they sang the line, "We won't go until we get some," they meant it. So now you know. With that in mind, let's get back to making our figgy pudding spam in case some carolers show up. A real Christmas gift for me would be if you'd take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. And let me know what you think in the comments section.
Well, thank you for joining me on this special Christmas edition of Making a Mess. Today I'm going to use my mess kit and I'm going to make Christmas dinner. So for this, I'll need all of my pots and pans, as well as one measuring cup. The other measuring cup I'll just set aside. And I won't need the large pan or bowl until later. So I'm also going to just set this aside for right now. And let's remove our ingredients. I will start with the special edition Spam Figgy Pudding. We also have our condensed milk. We're going to put that over here. We've got our sweet potato and our sweet potato ingredients. Mandarin oranges, a shallot, egg mixture for the eggnog, a little bit of vegetable shortening, some dried figs, some dried raisins, and our Christmas fruitcake dessert. Just going to place the bag down here. I'm going to put my dessert back in the bag. And I'm going to get myself organized. Once I get things squared away, I'll be right back. So to start, I'm going to use my vegetable peeler and I'm going to peel the sweet potato and cut that into small pieces so that we can cook the potato. I've peeled the sweet potato. I'm going to cut the ends off. And then I'll cut this into smaller pieces. And those ends you can just set aside for putting into a compost or whatever. Cut that potato into, I don't know, 1/2-inch squares, and then place them in your smaller pot. Next, take some water and cover that sweet potato entirely. It doesn't take very much, maybe 1/2 cup or so. Go ahead and light your stove. I'm using the 2-burner stove with propane. Put those potatoes on the stove over medium heat. Cover and let those cook. It'll take about 20 minutes. Once that water comes up to a boil, you'll want to reduce the heat to low and just let it continue to simmer.
Did you realize that each of the 3 recipes in this video contains the same spice? It may not have been obvious since it wasn't actually part of the mise en place, but the figgy pudding spam, along with the sweet potato and eggnog recipes, all contain nutmeg. Known for its medicinal qualities, the wooden-like nutmeg is ground to produce a powder that can be used to enhance the flavor of foods. It's a warm spice and has become associated with cooler weather, including Christmas, but is also a key ingredient in pumpkin spice, along with cinnamon and cloves, as well as occasionally ginger and allspice. Despite its name, nutmeg is actually a seed, not a nut. And on the tree, the fruit is similar to apricots. Actually, it's a drupe, meaning the flesh surrounds a pit like a peach and creates not one, but 2 spices we're familiar with: nutmeg, from the pit, and mace, from an outer coating or aril of the seed. Both are dried in the sun before moving to the next step in their process. The trees were originally found on a small group of islands in Indonesia, and only on these islands. Cloves also come from the same islands. The flavoring was once so rare and expensive that the English and Dutch actually went to war over it. Nutmeg had been traded along the spice route for almost 3,000 years, with its origin remaining a closely guarded secret. But in the early 1500s, the Portuguese discovered the spice's source. Less than 100 years later, the Dutch had decided they wanted to monopolize these spices and sent the military to conquer the Bandanese people. Fearing enslavement by the Dutch East India Company, the small island of Roon asked the British for protection in exchange for exclusive rights to their nutmeg and mace possessions. This infuriated the Dutch and was a key factor in the Second Anglo-Dutch War of 1665 to 67. The Treaty of Breda reallocated the small island of Run to the Dutch, the land of Acadia to the French, and all of New Netherlands to the British, which included New York, New Jersey, and parts of Massachusetts and Connecticut. So, why is Connecticut called the Nutmeg State when nutmeg trees never grew there? Well, the exact reason is unclear. There's a myth that it has to do with unscrupulous Yankee peddlers selling wooden nutmegs to unsuspecting Southerners, but I call that balderdash. Yankees may be shrewd in deal-making, but creating wooden nutmegs seems a waste of time, something native New Englanders tend to be quite frugal with by nature. I suspect it has far more to do with acquiring the state in exchange for nutmeg seeds in the Manhattan Transfer. So, now you know. I think the sweet potatoes are probably done. Let's go check.
While those sweet potatoes cook, prep the next section, which would be your figgy pudding spam. Special edition. If the spam won't come out of the can, just take a small knife, run it around the edge, ensure that it's loose, squeeze the can a little bit, and it should just pop out. We're not going to use all of this. We're only going to use half. So I'm going to cut this in half and place half on my cutting board. Set the other half aside. I'm going to slice this into squares, cubes. So first I'll split it, and then I'll split it again, and I'll wind up with 16 bite-sized chunks of the figgy pudding Spam. Take my fry pan and just put these right into the fry pan for now. I'll set those aside. As for the remainder of the Spam, well, it wouldn't be Christmas dinner without some kind of leftovers. So we're just going to place that Spam into a Loctite plastic bag. And that will be tomorrow morning's breakfast. Next thing we'll do is we'll cut the figs. So we want to quarter these, but there also is a stem on the top that can be very tough. So locate that stem and just remove that. And then I'm going to use a small bowl and put my fig quarters into the bowl. The figs should wind up about that size. And just place those all into your small bowl. Set those aside. Take your fig stems that you've cut off, and those can go in your compost pile as well. Next, we'll cut the shallot. Cut the end off. And I like to split it. Peel the shallot. They're basically like small onions, but their flavor is a little bit more mild. That will go really well with the sweetness of our figgy pudding Spam main entree. Once you've got that shallot peeled, the skins, you guessed it, they can go into your compost pile as well. Don't forget that you have your sweet potato cooking, and just check it occasionally to make sure that it's not getting overly tender. They're getting there, but they're not quite there yet. Put that cover back on. Let those continue to cook. The shallot we're going to just cut into small slices. I'm going to cut it into each side. I'm going to cut each side into fourths and then cut them. You'll wind up with some small pieces, and those you can put right into the bowl with the figs. The next thing we're going to want to do is brown the figgy pudding Spam. I'm going to light the stove. Put that Spam right onto the stove on a low heat, and we'll let the grease from the Spam start to come out and let that Spam begin to brown. I'm just going to use my spatula. And that should take about 2 or 3 minutes. Once that Spam is browned pretty much on all sides, remove it from the heat and just place it in a bowl, set it aside for now. You see I've got a little bit of darkness in the pan. Don't worry about that so much. Next we're going to open our vegetable shortening and put that right into the hot pan. And then return the fry pan to the heat to melt that vegetable shortening. That'll take just about a minute or so for that vegetable shortening to melt all the way through. And then turn the heat up just a little bit. And add your figs and shallot into the hot pan, placing the bowl aside. Mix that around. Make sure that all of the shallot gets covered. You're going to want to heat the shallots until they're translucent. The figs will also start to heat up and begin to become aromatic. That's going to take probably about 2 minutes. In the meantime, I've tested the sweet potatoes. They've softened up. I've turned them off and just let them sit with the cover on for the moment. Oh, that smells really good. Next, you're going to want to open the mandarin oranges. And we're going to use the juice from the mandarin oranges to make a sauce in that fry pan. And then gently pour the juice from the mandarin oranges into that hot pan. Set the mandarin oranges aside. Next, open your dehydrated, dried cranberries and add those in as well. Keep an eye on the pan. As the juice starts to bubble, it will begin to thicken into a sauce and reduce. Those dehydrated cranberries are going to start to absorb some of that juice as well and rehydrate so they're not quite so tough. I'm going to reduce the heat on that down to a very low heat. While that is thickening, remove your sweet potatoes from the stove and take out about 2 tablespoons of the liquid and put those into the bowl. As you can see, that liquid has all become a nice syrup. And I'm going to put the figgy pudding Spam right back into the center. Using my fork, I'm going to mix in the sweet potato dry ingredients into the water, which is basically going to reconstitute that milk. And it should be like a slurry. I'm going to drain the rest of the sweet potatoes, that water, and then I'll be right back. Those sweet potatoes are all drained. I'm going to grab a pot holder and put that down. Take my slurry and just pour that right into the hot pot. I use my scraper, make sure I get it all. And I brought a wire masher. I'm just going to mash the sweet potatoes with that milk and butter slurry. Got a little bit of nutmeg in there. Make sure you mash that really well. I'll set that aside for just a moment. I'm going to take my entree, place that aside. I've got a plate here, and I'm just going to put all of this into the plate, like this. Take my mashed sweet potato, scrape it into the side with the scraping spatula. And with the remaining mandarin oranges, just open and garnish the figgy pudding spam. And there is my Christmas dinner. Figgy pudding spam with shallots and mandarin oranges and figs, as well as sweet mashed potatoes. Of course, I don't want to forget dessert. Open my fruitcake packages, place them on a side plate, like so, and a Christmas dessert. I'm going to go eat my Christmas dinner.
By far, the most recognized beverage for Christmas is eggnog. First named just prior to the War for Independence, it has roots that date back to medieval England in a potion known as posset, but the term is purely American. Eggnog became popular in the colonies primarily due to the ingredients being readily available in the agrarian environment with milk and eggs plentiful. By adding sugar and nutmeg, luxury items, it was hoped that the new year would bring prosperity. A spirit would be added which was regionally based, usually brandy. In the Northeast, however, rum was locally produced and inexpensive. As the temperature outside dropped, the thick milk punch would warm from the inside. Served at dances and gatherings when the sun went down early, People would look forward to getting through the dismal gray chill and celebrate their winter solstice, or, as the Vikings called it, Yule. Although their puritanical ancestors snubbed Christmas, by the middle of the 1700s the holiday was gaining acceptance, and by 1826 spiked eggnog was the fuel for a riot at West Point, nearly eliminating that year's graduating class, including the future Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Originating in the West Indies, especially Jamaica, the liquor is made from molasses, a byproduct of refining cane sugar. Thrifty Yankees understood they could trade salted cod, a product they had in abundance, for barrels of the thick brown sweetener. The blackstrap molasses was distilled into rum, and the Kill Devil drink was sold or traded internationally, but much of it remained in the Northeast. In the early 1700s, John Hall began producing a style of rum in the small square in the town just north of Boston. Medford Rum took on a distinctive flavor profile and was part of the close to 160 distilleries, turning the dark syrup into a world-recognized commodity. By the time America was its own country, New England rum had peaked. As the country grew, grains became more readily available for making whiskey and bourbon, and the British, perhaps peeved at having lost the war and their colonies, placed a large tax on Caribbean molasses. The Lawrence family, who had taken over the Medford distillery from the Hall family, closed its doors in 1905, thus ending the production of rum from New England in Medford style specifically. But New England rum, like a phoenix, has risen again. Since the turn of the 21st century, rum production has been making a comeback in New England. There is only a handful of distillers, but the focus is on quality and the products are very good. Adding a good New England rum to traditional homemade eggnog just makes Christmas that much more merry.
Well, I finished my Christmas dinner, but it wouldn't be complete without a little bit of Christmas cheer. And for that, I'm going to make a traditional New England Christmas drink, which is known as New England style eggnog. Now, eggnog is typically made with fresh eggs and cream. I don't have fresh eggs, and I don't have cream because I don't use refrigeration. So I will use sweetened condensed milk, the eggnog mixture that I put together in my Mise en place, and my shot of New England style rum. To start, we're going to mix the eggnog mixture with just over 1/4 cup of water. So we'll measure that out. And we'll pour that into our improvised punch bowl. Add in the eggnog mixture, which is essentially the dehydrated eggs, the vanilla, some nutmeg and cinnamon, and just mix that together. It's going to be very wet. That's okay. Make sure that you get it all mixed. Now, as you can see, that's very, very wet. But reach around, make sure that you get all the sides. Use your scraper spatula if you have to. Get everything well mixed. And beat that so that it's very aerated. open your condensed milk. Some people are confused about the difference between condensed milk and evaporated milk, and I typically use evaporated milk in most of my recipes. But condensed milk is sweetened, and the sweetened milk works very well with the eggnog. However, it's also very thick, which is why we need to have plenty of liquid with the eggs. As you can see, sometimes it's a little more brown, and it is very thick. Just pour that right into the pot. Then using your scraper spatula, scrape that can clean. Get as much of that as you can. And now you're going to want to beat that for at least 2 minutes. And it's very thick. If you're not going to add rum, you might need to add about an ounce, ounce and a half of water to that to thin it down a little. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in our New England Tavern Rum. And mix that in as well until it's thoroughly mixed. And that rum thinned it down just a bit. And there is my traditional New England style eggnog in a fairly untraditional punch bowl. I wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and God bless you. Clean up your mess.